Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's Thursday morning at 11 o'clock. Welcome to our weekly Parsha Shiur. This week is a special Shabbos, of course. It's Shabbos Chazak, where we conclude the entire Chumash Vayikra. It's Shabbos Mevorchim Sivan, where we bless the month of Sivan, the month of Kabbalah and the Sinas HaTorah. And of course, it's Shabbos Parsha's Bechukotai. If you have a Chumash in front of you, open to Perek Chavov, Possuk Mem Beis. The Possuk which begins with the words "V'zacharti es prisi Yaakov," and here I want to study with you a few words from Rashi and the Medrash. But first, a brief introduction to explain the idea that's being communicated. So you know, of course, that in shuls, at least 4 times a year, there's a minhag that we say Yizkar, a special tefillah, a special prayer that's said for those who've lost loved ones. Immediate relatives and of that nature. And 4 times a year we say Yizkar. People take the tefillah of Yizkar very, very seriously. It's emotional. It's one which tugs really deeply at our heart and soul. And even people that, for one reason or another don't come to shul very often. But for Yizkar, you'll see people, they take it very seriously. They run to shul to say Yizkar. And again, Yizkar is a minhag. It's a minhag of a couple of 100 years, but one which, as with many minhagim, really touches the soul of Jews and really moves them on a very, very deep level. And there's various different minhagim surrounding the saying of Yizkar, as is customary among Jewish communities. One of the minhagim is that those who don't say Yizkar because they've never had the experience of losing a loved one or someone close like that, so they actually leave the shul for the saying of Yizkar. So there shouldn't be an ayin hora or things of that nature. In some communities, that's the minhag people leave. Now, an interesting conversation that I've had more than once actually with people about some of the minhagim of Yizkar really strikes a chord with people. And I'll tell you what it is. So the minhag is, excuse me, that during the first year after one has lost a loved one, a father, a mother, an immediate relative, or whatever the case may be. So the minhag is that you actually do not say Yizkar for that person during the first year after they've passed. This is the minhag. Now, if this is a person, if this is Loyalenu, the first time the person's had the experience of losing a loved one, so then they would begin to stay in shul during the saying of Yizkar. They don't go out like those people who don't say Yizkar. But the first year, within the first year after the person has passed, this is the minhag, is you actually don't say Yizkar for a person, for a loved one within the first year. And when people hear this, they're very thrown off by it. What do you mean? Why don't I say this person has lost their mother, their father, their spouse, a child? I mean, what? They very much want to say Yizkar for them. It's the wound is fresh and the person is very much still in emotional and psychological pain. And you tell them, no, you don't say Yizkar the first year. When people first hear this, it's sometimes very hurtful. Why would I not say Yizkar during the first year? When you tell them the reason, not only does the reason resonate with them, not only does the reason, not only do they usually accept it, but actually they identify with the reason very well. The reason why a person who's in the first year of Avelis, of the first year after having lost a loved one, may Hashem protect us. The reason why the person doesn't say Yizkar, it's explained, is because Yizkar means to remember. Now, what's wrong with remembering? Nothing, of course. But you only talk about remembering something when there's a necessity to remember it. Within the first year of Avelis, within the first year of loss, the loss is so real, the loss is so powerful. The person lives with the loss on the loss is so fresh, the person lives with it on such a daily basis that actually the concept of remembering the loved one is actually, it's inappropriate. It's too weak to describe the connection between the person and the one they've lost as one which you should remember. The term to remember, Yizkar, is too weak. The person the pain is too fresh to say you remember it. Do I remember it? I don't remember it. I'm living with it every single second of my life, right? Imagine if a husband comes home from a long day of work. This is my own analogy. Imagine a husband comes home from a long day of work, and he comes through the door, and his wife is so happy to see him, and she looks at him and she says, I'm so happy to see you. And he looks at her and he goes, oh my God, I'm so happy to see you too. I'm so happy to see you too. I just remembered we're married, right? It's safe to say that the woman would be very offended, right? Now, if the man watches his wife get offended, then as is the minhag of husbands, he may look at her with a genuine, dumbfounded, confused expression, and have no idea what did I do wrong? I just said I'm so happy to see you, and I just remembered that I'm married, and I'm delighted to remember that I'm married. The woman will go, you just remembered that you're married? If you have to remember, that means you're living in a frame of mind where there is some element of distance between yourself and the thing that you are remembering. A husband should never tell his wife, a woman should never tell his husband, oh, wow, I just remembered that we're married. A parent should never tell a child, oh my God, I just remembered that you're my child. That's a very inappropriate, very unhealthy, very hurtful way of speaking. Very, very unhealthy frame of mind. You don't remember that you're married. You don't remember your who your spouse is, unless a person has very serious mental challenges. Yes, if a person has to remember that they're married, then we're concerned about their well-being. In a similar type of sense, the Possuk explain, you don't say Yizkor for a person that you've lost within the first year. In the first year, you're not remembering them. You're still living with the loss. You're still living with the vacuum in a very real way. So yes, you stay in shul because you don't go out of shul, even if this is the first person that you've lost. But you wouldn't say Yizkor for them. It's still inappropriate. Okay, why are we talking about Yizkor? The Torah doesn't say one word about Yizkor. Yizkor is a minhag that's a few hundred years old. So take a look, Perek Chavov Possuk Membeis, Parshas Bechukotai. This is the third aliyah. This year, when Parshas Bahar and Bechukotai are separate, this is the third aliyah. And this aliyah is always received, I shouldn't say always, but most of the time received by the Baal Korah himself. Unless the Baal Korah himself is a Kohen or a Levi, then it's a different story. But other than that, the Baal Korah himself will receive this aliyah. In fact, the minhag is he's not even called up to the Torah. You don't even say, Yamoid the Baal Korah. No, the Baal Korah himself just takes it. Why is this? Because this aliyah is known as the Toichacha, the string, the set of curses that Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Jews will befall them if they do not sufficiently study Hashem's Torah and fulfill Hashem's wishes. Then you have this string, this collection of Toichacha, of curses that will befall the Jewish people in repercussion, in consequence of not fulfilling the mitzvahs. All right, how many curses is it? Some midrashim say 45, some say 49. Be it as it may, whatever the case may be, you have this in Parshas Bechukotai. The concept of the Toichacha appears once more in Parshas Kisovai, and the Poskim all say one is read before Shavuos, one is read before Rosh Hashanah, not directly before. There's always one Shabbos in between the Toichacha and the Yom Tov. But here it is as a preparation for Matan Torah. We have this Toichacha, this string of curses. Okay. Now the Baal Korah, when the Baal Korah reads it, of course you will know, the Baal Korah will usually read it relatively quickly and in a sort of a hushed tone, as if to show our reluctance, to read it and to say it, because some of the curses, some of these, at least on the surface level, they seem harsh, they seem very painful, they seem almost borderline cruel, and they speak about incredible suffering and pain that the Jewish people will go through, right? There's that famous story, I forgot who it was. I forgot it was one of the Chassidish Rebbes and one of the Rosh Yeshivas. I don't remember who it was. After the Second World War, so they were in a DP camp, and it came, whatever it was, Parshas Bechukotai, Parshas Kisovai, one of the Toichachos, and the Baal Korah was following the minhag, he lowered his voice and he was kind of reading it quickly. And in the middle, the Rosh Yeshiva, the Chassidish Rebbe, he banged on the table, and he shouts at the Baal Korah, he goes, Echer, Echer, say it louder, say it louder. And the guy's looking around, All right, sometimes people get upset when the Baal Korah reads the Torah quietly because they want to hear every word. They're concerned they're going to miss a word. The Baal Korah raises his voice a little bit. The Rosh Hashiva, the Rebbe keeps banging on the table. Echer, he says, louder, slower, say every word, shout it. After the Torah reading, they came to the Rosh Hashiva. They said, what do you want? It's the Torah. We read it slowly and quickly. He says, no. After what the Jewish people have just, was right after the Second World War, after the Holocaust, he says, after what we've just been through, he says, I want the Rabbeinu Shalom to hear every word that is written in this Torah. Let the Rabbeinu Shalom, let the Rabbeinu Shalom, so to speak, be embarrassed of what it is that he's done to the Jewish people. Every word in the Torah we've seen in Jewish history has been fulfilled. May Hashem protect us in the ugliest of ways. All right. So, be it as it may, with the exception maybe in the presence of great Rosh Hashivas and Rebbes, otherwise the minhag is the Baal Korah reads it quietly and relatively quickly. Basically toward the end, but not at the end, before the conclusion, toward the end of the Toichacha, appears this Possuk, quote, V'zacharti brisi Yaakov, the Rabban Shalom says, I'll remember the covenant I made with Yaakov, V'afes brisi Yitzchak, and the covenant I made with Yitzchak, V'afes brisi Avram, and the covenant I made with Avram, Ezkar, says the Rabban Shalom, I will remember, the Oretz Ezkar, and the earth I shall remember, the world, the land, the Eretz Yisrael I'll remember, the land of Israel. This Possuk, the Baal Korah reads slowly and loudly, as is the custom with the regular Torah reading. And then the next Possuk, V'oretz te'ozev mehem, the Baal Korah goes back to reading it softly. It's like an island in the middle of the whole reading of the Torah. The middle of the whole hushed and rushed reading. This one Possuk, V'zacharti brisi Yaakov, is seen as like a ray of hope, as a beacon of light in the middle of the darkness, where the Rabban Shalom reassures us and says, listen, I have something reassuring to tell you. Despite all of the toichacha that's going on, don't worry. V'zacharti brisi Yaakov, I'll still remember the covenant of Yaakov, of Yitzchak, and of Avram. Ezkar, the Rabban Shalom says, I shall remember. V'oretz Ezkar, I will remember Eretz Yisrael. Okay. This is what's written in the Possuk, and it's intended, at least this is the understanding. This is the understanding on a simple level. It's understood to be a reassuring message of Hashem. Hashem says, don't worry. I won't, like later it says, Hashem says, I'll never annihilate you completely. I'll always remember Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. The repercussions, the punishments will always be tempered, Hashem says, by me remembering the bris I made with Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Okay. Rashi, in his commentary, speaks about two difficulties in the Possuk. The first difficulty that Rashi speaks about is why the Torah lists Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov backwards. First Yaakov, then Yitzchak, then Avram. I don't know if, I'm assuming we're not going to have time. I actually don't want to get into this right now. Rashi gives an explanation. The way Rashi writes it is ambiguous. It's difficult to understand. It seems to be confusing. Basically, the Medrash says that the explanation of it is that the Rabban Shalom says, even Yaakov is enough to save the Jewish people. And if for whatever reason Yaakov is enough, we'll go further back, we'll include Yitzchak. And if that's not enough, we'll include Avram, and that will for sure be enough. All right, Rashi writes it in a way that's difficult to understand. We're not gonna get into that today. But then I want to talk about the second part of Rashi, which is very short, once again, in typical Rashi style, 2.5 lines. Rashi asks a question, gives an answer. You can read it 100 times and not chap what Rashi's saying, and it has to do with this concept that we're talking about of the meaning of Yizkar. I'm going to read it inside. Quote, "V'lomo lo nemro zechira b'Yitzchak," says Rashi. Why does the Torah not use the word zechira, remembrance, memory, when it comes to Yitzchak? Right? Look at the Possuk. V'zacharti es brisi Yaakov. Hashem says, I'll remember the bris of Yaakov. I'll remember the bris of Yaakov. Quote, V'afes brisi Yitzchak, and also the bris of Yitzchak. V'afes brisi Avram, Ezkar, and the covenant of Avram I'll also remember. So Rashi is asking a question here. There's a difficulty in the Possuk. Either the Possuk should have said, V'zacharti es brisi Yaakov, I'll remember the covenant of Yaakov. I'll remember the covenant of Yitzchak, and I'll remember the covenant of Avram. Or the Possuk should have said, I'll remember the covenant of Yaakov, and Yitzchak, and Avram. No. Hashem says, I'll remember the covenant of Yaakov and the covenant of Yitzchak, and I'll also remember the covenant of Avram. So when it comes to the bris of Yaakov and Avram, Hashem says, I'll remember it. But when it comes to the covenant of Yitzchak, it doesn't say that Hashem will remember it. So of course, that's what it means, right? Hashem says, we're remembering the covenant of Yitzchak, of Yaakov and Yitzchak and Avram. But yet the Torah goes out of its way to use the word zechira or yizkor, to remember, by Yaakov and Avram, and deliberately, explicitly omit it from Yitzchak. Very strong, very, if you think about it, a very powerful question. It could have said, V'zacharti brisi Yaakov, v'afes brisi Yitzchak, v'afes brisi Avram, period. And maybe add v'oretz eskor if necessary. But the Possuk doesn't do that. The Possuk says, V'zacharti brisi Yaakov. Or another option the Possuk could have said, V'zacharti brisi Yaakov, v'zacharti brisi Yitzchak, v'zacharti brisi Avram. Also not. Doesn't say that either. It could have said the word zechira once, and said I'll also and say af by the other two. It could have said the word zechira 3 times. Each one will have their own zechira. The Possuk does none of those. V'zachartius brisi Yaakov mentions zechira by Yaakov. V'afes brisi Yitzchak and the bris of Yitzchak. V'afes brisi Avram eskar. Again, the word zechira. So the word zechira is mentioned by Yaakov and Avram and not by Yitzchak. Why? Why does the Possuk not mention the concept of zechira, of remembering when it comes to Yitzchak? Here's Rashi's answer. I'll read it to you. Elos, says Rashi, the word zechira is not mentioned by Yitzchak. Why? Efroi shel Yitzchak, the Rabbanu Shalom says, the ashes of Yitzchak, nir lefonai, appear before me, tzavur, gathered, umunach, and lying, al hamizbeach. The ashes, Elos, says Rashi, rather, the ashes of Yitzchak appear before me, gathered and lying on the Mizbeach. And in typical Rashi style, boom, that's it. No explanation. What does that have to do with Zechira, with not mentioning Zechira by Yitzchak, Possuk the Shichos, that the ashes of Yitzchak, Hashem says, Nira lefonai, appear before me, they're heaped, they're piled up in the Mizbeach. What does this mean? So the simple understanding of this is that Hashem is saying, that the Rashi is saying, that Hashem says the zechus of the Akedah of Yitzchak, the ashes of Yitzchak here in a simple level, refer to the ashes of the ram that was burnt in the place of Yitzchak. The zechus of the Akedah, referred to as Afrosh of Yitzchak. That zechus, Hashem says, Nira lefonai. Nira lefonai means I see it in front of me the whole time. It's like, Hashem says, it's like I see in front of my face the ashes of Yitzchak as they're gathered and lying on the Mizbeach. I don't have to remember, this is the simple understanding of Rashi, I don't have to remember the covenant I made with Yitzchak. I have to remember the covenant of Yaakov, I have to remember the covenant of Avram, but not Yitzchak. Yitzchak, his ashes, says the Rabbanu Shalom, nir lefonai, they appear, I see them in front of me, as if they're gathered on the Mizbeach. So Hashem is saying, the commitment that he has to Yitzchak is stronger than remembering, right? Like saying a person wouldn't say Yizkor in the first year because the connection is still too strong, it's still too deep, it's still too raw, and the person is still too weak in that sense. So the Rabbanu Shalom says, so it is with Yitzchak. His ashes have gathered before me in front of the Mizbeach. Vulnerable is the word I'm looking for. Still too vulnerable. Okay. I want to push this idea a little bit further. It turns out that this business of, quote, Efroi shel Yitzchak, the ashes of Yitzchak gathered and lying on the Mizbeach, it's not just a theoretical concept, but it has had historically actual halachic ramifications. It's a real thing. And here I want to call your attention to a Gemara Masechta Zevachim, Daf Samach Beis, Amud Aleph, top of the page, where the Gemara asks a very interesting question. Right? I think the question itself also needs to be understood, but I want to stick to the point. The Gemara asks an interesting question. The Gemara is talking about the time when the Jewish people rebuilt the second Beis Hamikdash. So this is 70 years after the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. The Jewish people were finally allowed by the Persian king at the time, King Koresh, son of Esther and Achashverosh, to go back and conclude the rebuilding of the second Beis Hamikdash. And so they did. And they finally rebuilt it, and the second Beis Hamikdash stood for 220 years. Says the Gemara following, listen to some, quote 2 or 3 lines here, because I think this is wild. The Gemara asks a question. Frek the Gemara, Bishlema by how the Gemara is perturbed by the fact the Gemara is perturbed by a question. How did the Jews know exactly where to build the Beis Hamikdash? How'd they know? First Beis Hamikdash, they had Beis Shlomo HaMelech, who built it, David HaMelech, who made the plans for the Beis Hamikdash, David HaMelech did it with Shmuel HaNovi, etc., etc. So they had blueprints, they had whatever the case may be. The first Beis Hamikdash, somehow they knew how. But the second Beis Hamikdash, how did they, this is the Gemara asks, how did they know exactly where to build the Beis Hamikdash? The second Beis Hamikdash. Of course, it had to be built in exactly the same place as the first. The Gemara, Bishlema Bayis Minkarot Surasai. We can understand, says the Gemara, the Beis Hamikdash itself, the structure of the Beis Hamikdash, we can understand how they were able to rebuild the second Beis Hamikdash in exactly the same place as the first, because Minkarot Surasai, because the outline of the first Beis Hamikdash was still discernible, it was still recognizable. Right? Rashi says there were foundations, they were very deep. The Jews were able to find the foundations of the walls of the first Beis Hamikdash. They were able to rebuild it in exactly the same place. Hold on to your heads. Elo Mizbeach, but the Mizbeach, correct the Gemara, Mino Yodi. How did the Jewish people know exactly where to put the Mizbeach in the second Beis Hamikdash? This is the Akasha the Gemara, the Gemara says Kasha. The Mizbeach, the Beis Hamikdash, the second Beis Hamikdash, the Jews knew where it belonged exactly because they found outlines or foundations, they excavated, they found traces of the foundations of the first Beis Hamikdash, so they knew. But the Mizbeach, where they didn't have the foundations of the Mizbeach, how did they know? Akasha the Gemara, how did they know? The Gemara gives four answers. Four answers to this question. Number one, Omar Rabbi Lazar, Ro Mizbeach Bonoi u'michol Sara Godel Omer Demakri B'Lav. The Jewish people, Rabbi Lazar says they had a spiritual vision. They had a spiritual vision. They saw for the physical Beis Hamikdash there is in heaven a spiritual Beis Hamikdash, and the spiritual Beis Hamikdash also has a Mizbeach. And Michal, the angel, stood on top of the spiritual Beis Hamikdash and was offering up korbanos. So they knew exactly. They had some kind of, call it prophecy, call it vision, whatever the case may be. They saw the spiritual Mizbeach, and from that they knew how to build the physical Mizbeach. Answer number one. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha Omar. Answer number two. Says the Gemara, quote, Efroi shel Yitzchak ro'u shemunach ba'oisei mokem. Efroi shel, this is like mind explosive stuff. Efroi shel Yitzchak ro'u shemunach ba'oisei mokem. They saw the ashes of Yitzchak that was lying in that place. Now, what does the Gemara even mean? The ashes of Yitzchak lying in that place. So it turns out, as the commentaries point out, the Rambam tells us that the spot, the Mizbeach, the place in the Beis Hamikdash where the Jewish people built the Mizbeach, that was the same place where Avraham Avinu brought Yitzchak on the Akedah. It was also the place that Adam Rishon was created. It was also the place that Noach built the Mizbeach after he came out of the Teva. And in fact, the Rambam even adds that it was from this very spot when when Hashem created Adam Rishon, the first man, the Possuk says he took off from Adam, he took earth from the ground. Which part of the ground did he take earth from? This place. All right, be it as it may, there's one location on earth where Hashem took the earth and created Adam Rishon, where Noach offered his sacrifices, where Adam Rishon offered his sacrifices, where the first Beis Hamikdash stood, where the Akedah happened, where the first Beis Hamikdash had the Mizbeach, and the Gemara says they knew the spot because they saw some of the ashes from the Akedah of Yitzchak that were still lying there, shemunach ba'oisei mokem, that were still lying in the same place, and so that's how they knew exactly where to put the Beis Hamikdash. That's answer number two. Answer number three, says the Gemara, in the entire Beis Hamikdash there was an odor of ketores. The Beis Hamikdash smelled beautifully. There was an odor of ketores, even though the Beis Hamikdash had been destroyed for 70 years. But they were about to rebuild it. The rest of everywhere else in the Beis Hamikdash there was a smell of ketores, except in this spot, except in the spot of the Mizbeach where they offered korbanos. What did it smell like over there? Quote, Eivorim. Over there in this spot, it had the smell of limbs. What's the pshat limbs? Limbs b'pashtus means it had the smell of burning pieces of animals, of korbanos. That's answer number three. Omar Rabba Bar Chana, Omar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabba Bar Chana said the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Shloisha Neviim Olu Imoim Min HaGoyla. 3 prophets came up to Yerushalayim together with the Jews when they went back to rebuild the second Beis Hamikdash. One told them where the Mizbeach goes. One told them the size of the Mizbeach. One told them the place of the Mizbeach, and the other one told them that once the Mizbeach is built, you can bring Karbanos even before the Beis Hamikdash is built. All right, the Gemara says, according to some opinions, this was, if I remember correctly, this was Chagi, Zechariah, and Malachi. The Gemara does not say that. All right, maybe it's in the Medrash, I don't remember. Okay, 4 answers in the Gemara as to how the Jewish people knew when they built the second Beis Hamikdash, the exact location of the Mizbeach. Number 1, they had a spiritual vision. They saw the spiritual Mizbeach, so they knew the physical Mizbeach corresponds to that. They built it in that place. Number 2, they saw the ashes of Yitzchak as it was piled up on the Mizbeach. They saw the ashes of Yitzchak, Munach Boisemokim, lying in that place. Number 3, they could tell by the smell. The spot of the Mizbeach smelled differently. Everywhere else smelled like Torahs. In this place, it smelled like Evorim, like limbs. Rabbi Barbachana says there were 3 Nevi'im who came. One of them told them the size of the Mizbeach, one told them the place of the Mizbeach, and the third one told them that you can use the Mizbeach and offer up sacrifices even before you've built the Beis Hamikdash. What you see, the first point I'm making, what you see here is this idea that Rashi mentions the concept of the ashes of Yitzchak gathered on the Mizbeach. This idea is not just a spiritual concept. According to the Gemara, this idea was a physical phenomenon. There were actually ashes there. And they used the Yidden, when they found the ashes and rebuilt the second Beis Hamikdash, they knew based on those ashes that this is the place, the location of the Mizbeach in the second Beis Hamikdash. Okay. Before I move on, I want to quote for you another comment, another observation that's made on this Possuk, V'zacharti es brisi Yaakov, v'afes brisi Yitzchak, v'afes brisi Avram Eskar. This one, of course, from the Baal HaTurim. Baal HaTurim says like this. Baal HaTurim says something, of course, wild. Mamash wild. To the best, again, whenever I learn these Baal HaTurims, I always look to see, is the Baal HaTurim quoting this from a medrash? Is this a medrash we know? Is this not a medrash we know? Sometimes he himself writes that he's writing it in the name of his father, whatever the case may be. In some cases, he writes just what seems to be, again, what seems to be his own observation. The Baal HaTurim that I'm about to study with you, I don't know that there is known to us a source for this Baal HaTurim, but it's the Baal HaTurim himself, of course, is enough of a source. But it's just always particularly unique to me when the Baal HaTurim gives us this. Listen to the Baal HaTurim. Quote, Avraham v'Yaakov huzkeru roish la'os. We find, says the Baal HaTurim, both with regard to Avram and with regard to Yaakov, that in different places in the Torah, they're mentioned first, right? Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Avram is almost always mentioned first. We even find that Yaakov is mentioned first, like in our Possuk. Is Yaakov, Yitzchak, and Avram. But Yitzchak, loy huzkar b'shumakim b'roish. Says the Baal HaTurim, you'll never find that Yitzchak is mentioned first, ever. You'll never find Yitzchak mentioned first. Most of the time Avram, sometimes Yaakov, bottom line, never Yitzchak. Why? Why? What's schlecht Yitzchak? What's the problem? Why Yitzchak never comes first? Listen to this. Says the Baal HaTurim, Lefi sherotza loymar le'esav heve gvir la'achecha. Lefi sherotza loymar le'esav heve gvir la'achecha. La'asoi soy roish le'Yaakov. You see, says the Baal HaTurim, if you remember from Parsha's Toldos, Yitzchak wanted to bless Esav. In fact, he thought he was blessing Esav. It was his right wife, Rivka, who orchestrated that he really blessed Yaakov, not Esav. But in his mind, he was blessing Yaakov, he was blessing Esav. Okay. What was the blessing that Yitzchak actually gave Yaakov that he intended and that he thought he was giving Esav? You remember the bracha? He told him, Hashem should give you from the dew of the heavens, from the fat from the fat of the land. Roiv dogan v'siresh, you should have grain, you should have wine. Yavducha amim, nations should serve you. Ishtachavu l'chol umim, and princes should bow down to you. And then he told him, quote, Heve gvir la'achecha. You should be a master over your brother. You should be a master over your brother. These are the words that Yitzchak said to Yaakov, his son. Says the Baal HaTurim, yeah, he said it to Yaakov, and he blessed him. He blessed Yaakov that he should be a master over Esav. Yitzchak blessed Yaakov that Yaakov should be a master over Esav. In fact, later on, when Esav comes and asks for a bracha, when the plot is discovered and Esav asks for a bracha, Yitzchak actually tells Esav, it's not going to help for me to give you a bracha because I already made you a slave to your brother, and whatever a slave owns is owned by his master. So even if I give you brachas, it'll still go to your brother Yaakov. So Yitzchak blessed Yaakov that Yaakov should be a master over Esav, granted. Yes, says the Baal HaTurim, but it's not what Yitzchak wanted. Yitzchak wanted to bless Esav that he should be a master over Yaakov. Says the Torah, you wanted to bless Esav that he should be a master over Yaakov? You're never going first. Finished. Avram will go first because he was first, and his chus comes first. Even once, I think it's only once, maybe more, but at least once Yaakov goes first, yeah. But you, Yitzchak, never first. It's midah keneged midah. Because you wanted to make Yaakov, you wanted to make Esav, you wanted to say to Esav that he should be a master over Yaakov. Out. You'll never be first. Okay. What's mind-raising about this Baal HaTurim, what's hair-raising about this Baal HaTurim, besides for forcing us to understand what was Yitzchak thinking? Why did he want to make Yaakov a master? Why did he want to make Esav a master over Yaakov? Why would he want to do such a thing? In addition to that, what's particularly intriguing about this Baal HaTurim is that it's the opposite of what we're learning until now in Rashi, which actually the Baal HaTurim himself also quotes. Until now, we're learning that the Possuk intentionally omits Zechira, the word Zechira from Yitzchak. Why? The Rebbeinu Shalom says, Avram and Yaakov, them I have to remember. Them I have to remember. Yitzchak, I don't have to remember. Neither Lefonai, Hashem says, I see it before my eyes. His ashes, the ashes of Yitzchak, the Sichos of the Akedah, it's so real, I see it. I'm not going to remember that. It's as real to me as Hashem says, I see it before my eyes. In the same breath, the Baal HaTurim is going, yeah, but he's never going to be mentioned first. Because he wanted to make Esav a master over Yaakov. So this also needs to be understood. Why are we in a Possuk which goes out of its way to present Yitzchak in the most virtuous of ways? Why are we also interpreting it in a way that Yitzchak doesn't come first because he wanted to make Esav a master over Yaakov? And what is the explanation? What was Yitzchak actually thinking when he was trying to make Esav a master over Yaakov? Okay. Let's move on. Let's go deep. This business, of course, of the ashes of Yitzchak lying on the Mizbech. What is this even referring to, ashes of Yitzchak? So most commentaries learn that the ashes of Yitzchak means the ashes of the ram that was burnt on the Akedah in the place of Yitzchak. So those ashes, this is the ashes that Hashem is talking about that are lying before me on the Mizbech. Why is it called the ashes of Yitzchak? Number one, it took place at the Akedah Yitzchak. Number two, we know Rashi says very famously that as Avram Avinu offered up the ram, the Possuk says he offered a tachas benoi instead of his son. At every part of the sacrificing process of the ram, he would see daven that it should be considered as if he did it to his son. Right? He said that Rashi brings in the Parsha in the story of the Akedah that Avram was davening that it should be considered as if my son was shechted, and if his blood was sprinkled, and as if he was offered up the mizbeach, and as if he burned and became ashes. So it's called Efreshel Yitzchak, the ashes of Yitzchak. Now, we've learned about this before, but I'm going to dig it up again. We've learned before that although this is the simple understanding is when we talk about the ashes of Yitzchak, we're not talking about ashes of Yitzchak, we're talking about the ashes of Akedah Yitzchak, that are the ashes of the ram that was burnt. In the commentary on the Medrash called Pirkei de Rabbi Lezer, they quote from a sefer called Tanya Rabossi that the expression Efreshel Yitzchak is to be taken literally. It turns out, says the Tanya Rabossi, that our understanding of the Akedah is completely incorrect. We like to think that after the conversation between Avram and the Malach said, don't touch him, everything is fine. We like to think that Yitzchak got off the Mizbeach and they went home and everybody lived happily ever after. Says the Medrash, it's not what happened. What did happen? Although Avram did not lay a finger on his son Yitzchak did die on the Akedah. As he lay there on the Mizbeach, his soul did leave his body. And a fire came, different opinions whether this was a fire from heaven or not, whatever the case may be. A fire came and consumed him and turned him into ash. Efrei shel Yitzchak, he was consumed and he was burned and turned to ash. Okay, but the Torah says that after that he got married and he had children and Yaakov and Esav were born and all the rest of it. No problem, says the Medrash. The Rabbi Shalom brought from heaven a tal tchiyah. The Rabbi Shalom brought from heaven a dew that revives the dead and brought Yitzchak back to life. And then Yitzchak went on to have children, to get married, to marry Rivka, and have Yaakov and Esav and all the rest of it. But at that moment, he didn't just experience death. He didn't just experience leaving the world. He was actually burnt as a korban, until he turned to complete ashes. And it was from those ashes that the Rabbanu Shalom miraculously revived him. Based on this, the commentaries say, the expression that we find in Chazal in so many places, Efrei shel Yitzchak, the ashes of Yitzchak, it's not meant to be understood allegorically. It's not, some type of euphemism. The ashes of the ram that were burnt instead of Yitzchak. No! Efrei shel Yitzchak means the ashes of Yitzchak. Because he experienced being burnt, being sacrificed on the actual Akedah, on the Mizbeach. Again, it wasn't Avram who killed him, because the Malach tells him clearly, Al tishlach yodcha lanar, val tas loim uma. The Malach tells Avram clearly, don't do anything to him. So this is my understanding, it would have been like a sort of a klois nefesh, a spiritual experience where his soul leaves his body, but then is brought back, and his body experiences the full korban experience, being turned into ash. And then the Rabbanu Shalom revives him, and he lives his life from there. All right, without getting too much off topic, this explanation, by the way, fits beautifully with something else that we find by Yitzchak. We find that Yitzchak, of all the Avos, Yitzchak never left Eretz Yisrael. He was considering leaving Eretz Yisrael at some point, and Hashem told him, don't go. And the reason that's given, why did Hashem tell Yitzchak not to leave Eretz Yisrael? Hashem told him, because you are, quote, an oilot mima. Hashem tells Yitzchak, you are an oilot mima, you are a perfectly consumed, burnt offering, a korban oil, in the Sichos of the Akedah. So again, on a simple level, we learn the pshat is because he was tied up in the Mizbeach, and he was ready to sacrifice his life to Hashem, and he thought he was going to die, and he was prepared to die. In the end, it wasn't actually him who died and was sacrificed. In the end, it was a ram that was offered up tachas b'nai in the place of Yitzchak, instead of Yitzchak. It was considered as if it was Yitzchak. So therefore Hashem said, you're like an oila tamima, you're like a consumed, burnt offering. Don't go. So you have the kedusha, you have the holiness, you have the zechus of being an oila tamima, etc., etc. According to this, no. It's not the zechus, it's not symbolic, it's not allegorical, it's literal. When the Rabbanu Shalom told Yitzchak, don't leave Eretz Yisrael because you're an oila tamima, he meant you're an oila tamima. You were taken, you were put in the Mizbeach, you were sacrificed, you were burnt like a korban oila till you turned into ashes. And that's why Yitzchak never left Eretz Yisrael, being referred to as an oila tamima. Okay. I discovered something based on this idea that I guess I had either never noticed or never thought through, or maybe I did and I just completely forgot. I discovered something based on this that takes, again, another medrash, another Gemara that we know about Yitzchak to a whole new level of understanding. We know the Gemara tells us that when Mashiach comes, Hashem, the Rabbanu Shalom, this is the Gemara that says this at the end of actually the entire discussion about Matan Torah in Masechta Shabbos. The Gemara says this, very famous, that when Mashiach comes, Hashem is going to come to Avram Avinu, and Hashem's going to excuse me, Hashem is going to say to Avraham Avinu, Bonecha chotuli, your sons have sinned. Hashem will come to Avraham Avinu and say, your children have sinned. And Avraham Avinu, the Gemara says, will tell the Rabbeinu Shloim, the children have sinned, the Yidden have sinned, wipe them out. Let them be annihilated, let them be obliterated. The Medrash says Hashem will come to Yaakov and say to Yaakov, Hashem is hoping to get a better answer from Yaakov because Yaakov had Tsar Gidul Banim, had great pain raising children. Maybe he'll have mercy on them. Hashem comes to Yaakov and says, Bonecha chotu, your children have sinned. Yaakov gives the same answer. If the children have sinned, if my children have sinned, he says, Yimochu al kedusha shmecha, just wipe them out. Okay. Hashem, the Gemara says, is very unimpressed with Yaakov, with Avraham Avinu's answer and Yaakov's answer. So he goes to Yitzchak. He tells Yitzchak the same thing, your children have sinned. So first of all, Yitzchak says to the Rabbeinu Shalom, now you're calling them my children? When they said, the Gemara says this in continuation with the story of the giving of the Torah. Yitzchak says to Hashem, when the Yidden said Nasser before Nishma, you called them your children. Now that they sinned, you're calling them my children? And besides, he says, Yitzchak says, how much did they already sin? Sachakol, they live 70 years. Half of the time they're sleeping, half of the time that they're awake, they're eating and they're taking care of other bodily needs. A couple of years, what's the big deal? Yitzchak says, you take half, I'll take half. You carry half the responsibility. I'll carry half the responsibility, and then just forgive them and let's be over with it. But then the Gemara adds these words. Listen to this. V'im timtza loymar kulam alai, says Yitzchak to the Rabbeinu Shloim, when Mashiach comes, and there will be the final day of reckoning, and the Jews will be, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov will be called to task for the sins of their descendants. Yitzchak, the only one who comes to their defense, will say to the Rabbeinu Shloim, if you'd like me to carry all of these sins, to bear all of the iniquity, no problem. You can put it all on me. Why? Listen to these words. Hokrevis nafshi kamoch. Hokrevis nafshi kamoch. Behold, says Yitzchak, I have already sacrificed myself before you. Yitzchak tells the Rabbeinu Shalom, what are you coming to me with, kindness, with complaints the Jewish people have sinned? I'll take it all. In Yiddish we say, Af meine breite plexus, on my wide shoulders, put it all on me, I got no problem. What he says to the Rabbeinu Shalom, you're going to come after me? Hakrevis nafshi kamoch, I already gave my life for you. I gave away everything for you. I have nothing left. Hoschu v'amrus, concludes the Gemara. All the Jewish people will turn and point to Yitzchak and say, Ki ato avinu, you are our true father. End of quote. The Gemara goes on, but this is the part that I'm quoting. What's the Gemara saying? The Gemara is saying Yitzchak will say to the Rabbeinu Shalom, no matter what the Jewish people have done, my zechusim should be able to take care of everything. Why? I sacrificed myself before you. So again, on a simple level, what's he saying? I was prepared to sacrifice myself for you. I was ready to sacrifice. I had my hands and feet bound on the Akedah. I was ready to have my throat slit for you, on a simple level. On a deeper level, based on the Tanya Rabbasi, no! I actually sacrificed myself for you. I died. I was burnt and turned into ashes. The ashes of Yitzchak were lying on the Mizbeach. In that Sichos, Yitzchak tells the Rabbeinu Shalom, you're going to have to forgive all the Jewish people, give them a pass, and usher in the era of final redemption. There's nothing that you can hold against them. And when the Jewish people hear this, they turn to Yitzchak and they say, Ki ato avinu, for you are our father, you are our father, you are our father. All right. So let's try to tie all of these loose ends together and come out with what is the message here? What is the point? What do we take from this? The Possuk is in the middle of talking about the curses that will all befall the Jewish people. They are bitter. They are ugly. Unfortunately, in our history, we've seen them all come true. And right in the middle, the Rabbeinu Shalom reminds us, by the way, Don't think that I'm going to forget about what it is that's going on. Don't think that I'm going to forget about Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov and the covenants that I've made. No, I'm not going to forget. I'm not abandoning you, God forbid. There's a need, there's a process, there is some divine master plan which we don't understand, that the Jewish people have to go through this, etc., etc., etc. I'll remember Yaakov, says the Rabbanu Shlomo, and Yitzchak, the covenant I made with Yitzchak. Va'afes brisi Avram ezkar, and I'll remember Avram. I'll remember Avram Avinu as well. Yes, says Rashi. But Hashem doesn't say that he's going to remember Yitzchak, because the ashes of Yitzchak piled up on the Mizbeach. The sacrifice that Yitzchak made, the first one to actually die, I would say, as a Jew, right? If Avraham Avinu is the first Jew, then the first one to actually experience this being sacrificed, Yitzchak. His ashes lie on the Mizbeach forever. I want to tell you what I think that means. You see, we all have within us a little Avraham Avinu, a little Yitzchak Avinu. I shouldn't say a little, a big, right? We all have within us an Avraham, a Yitzchak, and a Yaakov. We carry Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov inside of us. Avraham Avinu teaches us, the Avraham within us teaches us to be, to stand up to the world, to influence people, to be people of chesed, to etc. Everything that Avraham Avinu lived. Yaakov Avinu teaches us, we can go down to Mitzrayim, we can survive Mitzrayim, we can have children, we can have grandchildren, produce Jewish families, all the things that Yaakov Avinu did. The one that Torah speaks about the least out of all the three is Yitzchak. Yitzchak lived the longest, and the Torah tells us the least about it. The Yitzchak Avinu that we carry around within us, the Gemara says, is more powerful than them all. And that's why when Mashiach comes, we're going to turn on and say, Yitzchak, Yat Avinu, you are our true father. Yitzchak gave us something. Yitzchak gave us something that is more powerful, that is the most powerful of all the three of us. What is it? I would say it's actually two things. Number one, the being prepared to have Mesiras Nefesh. The willingness of a Yid, a Jew being prepared to die al Kiddush Hashem, to go through fire and through water and all the rest of it, to experience, the being ready to have Mesiras Nefesh. This comes to us from Yitzchak. But actually, Yitzchak wasn't the first for that. Avraham Avinu also was thrown into fire. So what do we have? What did Yitzchak pioneer here that we didn't have, not before and not after? Maybe this is the explanation. Avraham Avinu was thrown into a fire and saved. Avraham Avinu was thrown into a fire, but he was saved. Yitzchak, according to this interpretation, that Yitzchak actually, that Efresh Yitzchak means the actual ashes of Yitzchak, he actually became an Oila Tmima. Yitzchak was the first Jew to actually become physically, if according to this medrash that says it was literal, physically a korban to Hashem, an Oila Tmima. And then the Rabbanu Shlomo revived him, brought down Du Tal Tchia, brought him back to life. So Yitzchak says to the Rabbanu Shlomo, I already sacrificed myself to you completely. Nothing is left. He didn't just die. He was turned to ashes. And then the Rabbanu Shlomo brought down Du and brought him back to life. Brought him back. So every moment of his life that he experiences after that, including the children that he has, including everything that comes after that, is all taking place in the lifetime of a person who wasn't just prepared to give away everything as a korban to Hashem, he actually did. And then the Rabbanu Shlomo revived him. Says the Rabbanu Shlomo to a Yid in the middle of the Toichacha, in the middle of I shouldn't say smack in the middle, toward the end. But while the Balkaira is in a hushed tone rushing through the Pasukim, talking about holocausts and inquisitions and October 7th and the enemies who rise up against us in every generation, Yemach Shemam v'zichram. Says the Possuk, listen to me. V'zacharti es brisi Yaakov. V'zacharti es brisi Avram. I'll remember the covenant of Yaakov and Avram. But there's also Brisi Yitzchak. There's also the covenant of Yitzchak. There's also the story of Yitzchak that lives within you as a Jew. And it's not something that needs to be remembered. It's alive. It's pulsating in your veins. It's the very essence of your existence. It's who you are. You want to know what a Yid is? A Yid is Brisi Yitzchak. A Yid is an individual who actually got burned, Rahman al-Islam, as a korban to Hashem, and then was revived completely miraculously and built a Jewish nation from there. The idea, the reason why I'm stressing this is it's not just an encouraging messing, right? It's not just optimism. Even if the Jew, Rahman al-Islam, will be burnt, the Rabbanu Shalom will still bring them back through Tchias HaMeis. It's also true 100%, but it's much deeper than that. We're talking about definition here. It means once Yitzchak was burnt and then revived by the Rabbanu Shalom's miraculous Tchias HaMeis process, we're talking about a Tchias HaMeis Yid. We're talking about a Jew who actually experienced death and then was brought back to life. It's like he had, his yahrzeit and his birthday, so to speak, the same day. He's now a miraculous being brought back to life by the very divine nature of the miracle of a miracle of Tchias HaMeis. That becomes the essence of the very essence of who a Jew is. Hashem says to the Jew, I don't need to remember this. I see it before me all the time. When I see a Jew, this is what I see. Hashem says to the Jew, maybe you need to remember this. Maybe you need to remind yourselves of this. Then you'll remember who you are as Yidden. Then there won't be, please God, any more need for the Teichach. Listen to this, says the Gemara. More than 1,400 years after the story of the Akedah. More than 1,400 years later, when it came time for the Jews to build the second Beis HaMikdash. After they had the first Beis HaMikdash, and they had the Mishkan, and they had Moshe Rabbeinu, and they went into Eretz Yisrael, and they'd been banished from Eretz Yisrael, and after they went through the whole story of Purim and everything, when it came time to build the second Beis HaMikdash, it came time to build the Mizbeach. And they didn't know where to build it. What does that mean? They didn't know where everything else they knew. The Mizbeach, they didn't know. The Mizbeach gains forgiveness. The Mizbeach is the place where the Jewish people go and they reignite their connection with Hashem. Whatever it is that went wrong in the past, they can fix it. They're looking, where? Where do you go? Where is there a place in the world where you can go, and no matter what type of sin, no matter what type of spiritual darkness a Jew has experienced, you can offer up a sacrifice, some kind of sacrifice, and you'll be reunited with Hashem? Where is that? Couldn't find it. I believe the Gemara means not just they couldn't find it technically, they couldn't find it conceptually. How do you find such a thing? Until the Rabbanu Shalom said, look into yourself. They found the ashes of Yitzchak. They found the Yitzchak within themselves that was still carried this Mesiras Nefesh, and this definition as a Jew, as a Yitzchak who was burnt as a korban oil for Hashem. They found those ashes. They built the Beis HaMikdash. I wonder. Now I'm speculating here. If I'm wrong, I humbly apologize. But I wonder if when the Gemara says that the rest of the Beis HaMikdash smelled like Keteris, and this particular place smelled like Evorim, smelled like limbs. On a simple level, the Gemara obviously means it smelled like the limbs of animals. But I wonder if on a deeper level it doesn't mean, conceptually, it isn't referring to the Evorim, to the limbs of Yitzchak. They found the ashes of Yitzchak. They found the ashes. The fact that it was still there 1,400 years later is an absolute miracle. But if they found the ashes, maybe they still smelled it. It's like when you're trying to reconnect to an experience. There's different ways. You can see visions from the experience. Maybe the smell came back to them. Maybe they smelled Yitzchak burning on the Mizbeach, and something within the side of them woke up and said, we are Yitzchak. We are his descendants. We are his descendants. We carry that level of Mesiras Nefesh within us. It's the story of our lives and our existence. Okay. Says the Baal HaTurim, conclude with this. Says the Baal HaTurim, you notice, Yitzchak never goes first. Yitzchak always in the middle. Either Avram will go first, or Yaakov will go first. Yitzchak is always in the middle. Why? Because Yitzchak wanted to make Esav Gvir la'achecha. He wanted to make him a master over his brother. What does that mean? That Yitzchak wanted the Jewish people to be ruled by Rishoyim, Rahman al-Islam? Obviously not. What does it mean? When Yitzchak wanted to bless Esav, we learned this many times. Yitzchak wanted to bless Esav. He wanted to transform him into holiness. He wanted to end. If Yitzchak would have blessed Esav, I quote from the Balaturim, right? It tells him, "Sono kelecha telyecha kashtecha tzeyasoda." He wanted to put an end to every gullus that would ever exist for all the rest of history. Had he blessed Esav at that time, he would have ended every element of negativity associated with Esav. Says the Balaturim, Yitzchak doesn't go at the beginning, and Yitzchak doesn't go at the end. Yitzchak goes in the middle. You know why? Because the beginning is an introduction and the end is a conclusion. What's the middle? The middle is the essence. The middle is the point. The middle is the substance. The middle is what it's all about. The middle is at the, when you want to talk about the truth, right? When you talk about the truth, you talk about what's in the middle, what's at the core of it. Cut away all the bells and whistles. Cut away the introductions and the conclusions, right? What do they say? When a rabbi speaks, you should do two things, right? You should tell them what you're going to say. You should say what you're going to say. You should tell them what you said. And you should sit down. There's always everything in the Eibishter made in this world needs a point, needs an essence, needs what is at the heart of it. It needs actual definition. What is it at the heart of it? In the end, what is it? It's that part that we're not remembering because it is. It's that Sichos that a Jew carries, that when everything else fails, even Avram and Yaakov, however you're going to explain it, as the Gemara says, that when Avram and Yaakov say, wipe the Jews out, Yitzchak will say, no. Yitzchak will say, Rebbeinu Shel Olam, look at every single Jew, look deep inside, look into the middle of the Jew. Not the beginning and not the end, look into the essence. And you'll find, says Yitzchak to the Rebbeinu Shel Olam, you'll find me. Ki ata avinu, you'll find Yitzchak. Who is Yitzchak? Yitzchak is the one who actually sacrificed himself for the Rebbeinu Shel Olam. And the Rebbeinu Shel Olam revived him with a dew of Tchias HaMesim. And the Jewish people remained from that point on a miraculous, above nature existence. All right. I hesitate to conclude this way, but I would be amiss if I didn't. Rahman al-Islam, on October 7th, just a couple of months ago, we once again experienced our own brothers and sisters who became oilot mima, who were physically burnt by our enemies and turned into ashes, just simply because they were Jews. That's it. That was the only thing they were persecuted for, because they were Jews. That's it. And for that, once again, Rahman al-Islam, may Hashem protect us. May this never, ever, ever happen again. Jews were burnt because they're Jews. And after that emerged everything that has happened since then, and the anti-Semitism, and the hatred, the hatred for Jews just rears its ugly head all over the world. I don't have to tell you, you know everything I know and probably more. And yet, despite the fact that the Jewish people have gone through this, the neshama of our nation is alive, and it's strong, and it's powerful, and it experiences a rebirth, and the Jewish people define themselves as Jews and say to the world, it doesn't matter. We know exactly what this is because we've seen it before over and over again. And there's nothing in the world that can break us. And maybe, dare I say, when the Gemara says that La'asid Lavai, the Rebbeinu Shel Olam will come to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov and say, your children, your descendants have sinned. And Avram and Yaakov will have a difficult time defending the Jews for whatever reason until it comes Yitzchak, and Yitzchak says, Rebbeinu Shel Olam, you're criticizing my children for sinning. I'll carry it all on myself because I sacrificed myself for you. Maybe what Yitzchak really means is, Ribbono Shel Olam, you're criticizing the Jews for sinning? From the day that I was put on the Akedah and beyond, Jewish people have been taking their children and themselves and putting them on the Akedah. They've been put on the Akedah in one form or another, and Rahman al-Islam, they've been burnt as Jews. These are the Jews you're criticizing for sinning? These are the Jews you're criticizing for sinning? The Jews who were burnt, Rahman al-Islam, physically because they're Jews. And the Jewish people hear that, and like I can picture it in my mind. They give Yitzchak a standing ovation, and they point to him and they say, Ki Ato Avinu, thank you, Yitzchak, for highlighting, for pointing out, for being the Yitzchak within every one of us that carries the Jews through these dark and painful toichachos and moments of Mesiras Nefesh. Until we come out, please God, at the other end, with Ribbono Shel Olam will once again give us the Torah and once again bring us back to Eretz Yisrael and bring us back Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov and our ancestors and all the tzaddikim and all the hostages. And the Jewish people, please God, will be safe forevermore. But at that moment of truth, L'Asid Lovay, when the Ribbono Shel Olam looks the Jews in the face and says, how could you sin? It's this Zechus of Yitzchak. It's this Mesiras Nefesh that Yitzchak Avinu has. The reason why he's always put, in the words of the Baal HaTurim, in the middle, because Yitzchak, at the heart, in the center, in the thick, in the core of the definition of a Jew, embodies this attribute of self-sacrifice and endurance. Have a wonderful Shabbos.